It's not enough to just have a clear intention, because clear intentions have very little effect on the nature of reality. Most people don't know that they're moving in and out of the quantum field 7.8 times per second. That you're vibrating in and out of the field all the time, and every time you leave, you disappear, and when you come back, you disappear into that field of information, and you come back with information. But if you go out as the same person, you don't bring any new information back. Are you with me? If you look at quantum physics, the physics of possibility, it's really talking about the spiritual aspect of ourselves, because you couldn't explain a miracle, you couldn't explain a biological process, you couldn't explain a simple healing of a cut at this point without understanding the quantum model of reality. And that there are particles, which are matter, it's you and I, and everything in this physical world, and then there's energy. And that energy has a consciousness, it has an awareness, and that energy is a field of information that we are an extension of, that we have access to. And that we spend so much of our life looking outside of ourselves instead of looking inside of ourselves. And that we are really conditioned to look just for particles and matter instead of energy and information. And truly, when people reach the end of their beliefs or they're facing crisis in their life, that's the moment they start to turn within and start to ask the bigger questions. And if you were astute enough to look at this in moments of contemplation, if you were wanting to hide God anywhere, it would be a good place to hide. It would be within the human being, because everybody's looking outside of themselves, and we look for reasons to change and regulate our emotional states. We think that things and people and external things will really fulfill emotions that we're trying to change within us. And that truly, when we start to really investigate who we are and look to see how we do that and demystify it, I think once we start to demystify it, it can become a skill. And so Einstein was a super cool guy because he spent a lot of time inward. And at 12 years old, he asked himself this simple question: if I ride my bicycle at the speed of light and I turn my lamp on, I turn my headlight on, will it go on? And so he thought about that question every single day of his life. Every day of his life. He would go out in a boat on a lake as a child and lay on his back in the boat and look up at the sky and think about this. And he was building models of understanding. He was working his best to be able to figure out how light and energy were related. He did it for 10 years. He was possessed by the concept. And finally, he was working as a third-rate clerk in a Swiss patent office, and he was watching this man fix the roof across the way. And he just paused for a moment, and he was watching him, and the moment he was watching him, he got this incredible vision. And he understood how light and energy were related. It was a very abstract vision. And it was so abstract and so dimensional that he had to go back to school to learn the mathematics to be able to explain what he saw. And his wife, his first wife, was an amazing scientist, and she helped him with a lot of the mathematics. And so when Einstein began to figure it out, he narrowed it down to that one simple equation, that E equals mc squared, energy and matter related, and the currency converter is the speed of light. And so it became very interesting because when Einstein published his papers on relativity, he didn't say like, hey, this person said this and this person said this, and I'm going to footnote this person do that. He just said, ladies and gentlemen, this is how it is. And it rocked the scientific community because he didn't really need anybody else as a reference. He had a discovery, and his discovery was so unique. And his brain really was wired for the understanding of light, and light was the ceiling of this reality. And so Einstein and Planck started doing these really interesting experiments where they were taking energy and they were putting energetic impulses into metals. And what they were looking to see is if electrons behave the same way as the very large. In other words, when an apple falls from the tree, it falls in a very specific way. It falls towards the center. It falls towards the larger body. So He reasoned, well, if we disturb electrons, and him and Planck were doing these experiments, if we disturb these electrons, then they should fall just like an apple falling from the tree towards the nucleus. It should be predictable, just like it's predictable in Newtonian physics and classical physics. Well, when they started disturbing the electrons, something very unusual happened. The electron gained energy, then it lost energy. And it gained energy and it lost energy. And it gained energy and it lost energy. And instead of it falling like a ball rolling down a hill, it was like a ball rolling down steps. All of a sudden, they became very aware that the subatomic world, the very tiny, didn't behave like the very large world. And so then they started to look for the electron. They started to try to measure it. And everywhere they looked for it, it appeared. And when they turned their back on it and they no longer looked to measure it, it went from a particle that collapsed, called collapsing the wave function, back into energy. Now, this was a revolutionary moment because this meant that subjective mind, your mind has an effect on the objective world, that mind and matter are somehow correlated. And so this birth of quantum physics came along, and this quantum physics experiments say that you cannot do a quantum physics experiment without an observer around. In other words, a mind always has to be present because it will influence the outcome. You with me? So now, that invisible field of spirit, that invisible field of information and energy, somehow you, as an individual, can influence the nature of reality with your mind. So now Einstein had a lot of trouble with this because he said, God doesn't play dice and it doesn't work like this, but his brain was wired for light. And so he had the abstraction and he was getting the download of information, understanding the field of light. And the quantum physicists were saying, well, actually there's a field of information beyond space and time, beyond light, where everything is unified. And you can take two photons that have been somehow related in a specific atom and shoot them to the opposite ends of the universe. And the moment you affect one photon at the exact same time, the other one is affected. So they were being connected or affected in a realm faster than the speed of light. In other words, it would take time if you affected one for the other one to be affected. But if they were beginning to be affected at the exact same time, they were connected in a realm beyond physical reality. Are you with me? And so when the movie What to Believe came out, and we basically made an effort to show that your mind has an effect on reality, and that in order for you to begin to change your reality, you got to change your mind and change the way you live your life. And we wanted people to become inspired by the process of creation, really give it a shot. And that independent of your gender, of your race, of the color of your skin, of your intellectual ability, independent of your past, independent of your age, that on some level we are all divine creators, and that these models of reality that have separated individuals have all been built on human beings living in a very limited state of mind. And so when quantum physics was born and the whole concept of reality began to unfold, people started to really challenge the nature of reality, and that concept that you are somehow connected because you are made of photons and atoms and electrons, that on some level you are an organization, a community of 70 trillion to 120 trillion cells, and all of those cells are made up of atoms and molecules and chemicals. And all of those are working in a coherent form to express yourself as a physical body. But most people don't know that they're moving in and out of the quantum field 7.8 times per second. That you're vibrating in and out of the field all the time, and every time you leave, you disappear, and when you come back, you disappear into that field of information, and you come back with information. But if you go out as the same person, you don't bring any new information back. Are you with me? And if you can begin to observe a vision that represents a future, and you can hold steadfast to that vision, and you can see that vision clearly in your mind, and every day you understand where you place your attention is where you place your energy, then you would be investing your energy into the future. And the image that you see could literally be the template for trillions and trillions of atoms to organize into patterns of information called an event in your life. And so, but it's not enough to just have a clear intention, because clear intentions have very little effect on the nature of reality. That the driving force that couples the co-maiden, the handmaiden to all of that is an elevated emotion. And so when you combine that clear intention with an elevated emotion, it is the elevated emotion that begins to amplify the field around your body. And in that moment, you become more energy and less matter. And if you understand then that the emotion then is the handmaiden to the creative process, that means that you would have to feel whole before your healing. That would mean that you would have to feel abundance before your wealth. That means you would have to feel awe before the mystical moment. That would mean you'd have to feel love before your new relationship. That would mean you'd have to feel empowered before your success. And that means then when we do this properly, then we're no longer functioning as materialists. We are literally function as quantum minds. And only when you're truly conscious and truly aware are you beginning to affect the nature of reality. Taking small moments in your busy life to understand that when your consciousness merges with a greater consciousness, when you're connected to Source, you will emulate the divine. And how would the divine live if it was you? Thanks for listening.
I do this every day. How'd I do? How'd I do today, bro? How'd you do? Did you do good? Where'd you fall from grace? What was it that caused you to go unconscious for the rest of the day? Like, what was that moment? Now, if you're a student of life, you'll begin to contemplate, well, it was that person that said that thing, then I reacted, or I got this email, or things didn't go my way, and I started feeling angry or frustrated or fearful. The next time that happens, how could I evolve my experience? Now, you may have to search for some answers of the best model to build, or you may actually have a long contemplation and start to go, God, the next time that happens, I think I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or I'm going to plan my behaviors. And the act of closing your eyes and rehearsing what you're going to do begins to install the neurological hardware in your brain to look like you already did it. Now the brain is no longer a record of the past. Now it's a map to the future. And if you keep installing that hardware, the hardware will become a software program, which means you'll just start acting like a happy person. Why? There's no magic there. You installed the circuitry. So that's more important than the news.
Right.
It's more important than answering any email or any text. It's more important than talking about your past or some dinner. If you can begin to just think about how you're going to do it differently, that's the building process neurologically already. So now you have to get conscious in order to do that. And it takes some time. It means you got to shut your cell phone off. You got to close your door. You got to take a break from everything out there and begin to practice. And so by experience then, you start noticing, oh, here it comes the frustration, here comes the fear. And now we've given people the tools to be able to self-regulate, to create brain and heart coherence. And so you see people say, excuse me 1 minute, I just need a minute. They take some breaths, they get back in, they connect to the energy of their future. This is incidental compared to where they're going. So they don't fall from grace. They don't allow their energy to drop. And so, yeah, in the beginning, it takes a lot because it takes a lot of energy and awareness to stay conscious and not go unconscious. But if you're persistent and you're determined and you're sincere, you begin to figure it out. You begin to say, I am not going to give my power away to that person or that circumstance when I can use it to heal or to create a new future. And so people then won't excuse themselves and say, I had a hard day yesterday, I had a fight with my coworker or my ex, and I don't feel like doing the work. Well, that's the time to get back on the horse.
Yeah.
Because it's all of those times that we self-correct. Those are the most valuable moments to us. People who've had profoundly transcendental experiences where they we say got lit up, they connected, and their brain goes into very, very high coherent states and super gamma patterns that are way outside of normal, and they have a transcendental download or connection that's mystical. They look back at their entire life. They don't want to change one thing in their past because it got them to that moment. That's the moment the past no longer exists. Now, by the same means, they look back at their past and they see all those tough moments where they overcame themselves, and they fall in love with that person. They don't look at the good meditations or the things that went well. They know that it was those moments that got them to this moment. And I think then that's when they begin to understand that all of the hard work, all the effort in who we become makes, no one can take that away from us. So then once we arrive at that level and we experience whatever the dream is or whatever we create, the next thing is do it until you fully enjoy it. And then when it gets boring or predictable, let's go again. Let's do something else.
Yeah.
And I think that's evolution.
My daughter probably is really the greatest creator I've ever come across in my life. My daughter was 15 years old, and it was the summertime, and she sat down with me, and she just, by the way, had finished her last creation, which was acting in a music video that she created that became #1 in the United States on the charts. So she was with me at in the summer, and I said, so Gigi, what do you want to work on next? What do you want to work on? And now, she's 15 years old, so you can imagine. And she said, I want an unlimited shopping spree. Now, what am I going to say to her? No? I said, okay, here's the deal. You got to practice this every day. And I want you to get very clear on your mind on what it would be like to have the most amazing shopping spree of your life. But you can't get up as the same person who sat down in your meditation. You have to get up like you just had the most amazing shopping spree and you shopped your brains out. And what do you think she said? No problem, Dad. And so it was the summertime, and in the summertime, children love their freedom. But she worked with me, and I wake up at 4:30 in the morning, and I do my meditation, and then I'm waiting for her, and I hear the alarm go up. And I hear her rustle around in there, and then I hear her settle down, and I wait. And 30 minutes later, boom, the door opens up. And I look at her and I go, how was it? And she goes, and I said, you have to recondition your body into believing that future event is happening to you now, because your body, as the unconscious mind, does not know the difference between an actual experience that produces an emotion that you fabricate by thought alone. And you have to change the circuitry in your brain neurologically to look like the event has happened. Then you have to emotionally condition your body into believing that future event is already done. And when your thoughts and feelings are aligned, when your mind and body are working together, you're headed for a new destiny. Now, there were some mornings she didn't want to do it, but I kind of knocked on her door and I said, hey, come on, I did mine, you gonna do yours? And I got down on her level and I let her know that I had completed mine, and I asked her to complete hers. Now, I was in Washington, D.C., I'll never forget this. I was driving in the cab getting ready to do this lecture, and the phone rings and it's my daughter on the phone. Now, I can't tell if she's laughing or she's crying, but she's altered in some way. And I say, what? Oh, that unlimited shopping spree, it happened today. I said, really? Tell me everything, don't leave anything out. She said, okay. And she was visiting a friend of hers in Santa Monica, California. And I live in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. And she said, okay, Dad, I went to my favorite store. And my buddy and I were rifling through the racks. You know how kids do that. And she said, all of a sudden, this guy walks up to us, my friend and I, and says to my friend, hey, is your father Sam Borelli? And the young girl says, yeah, that's my dad. He said, okay, you two come with me. And he says, Listen, your dad did me a major favor 6 months ago, and I've been trying to figure out a way to pay him back. And so he reaches into his pocket, he pulls out the company credit card, and he said, "Ladies, have a nice afternoon." The cab pulls over on the side of the road, and I say to my daughter, "How much did you spend?" She said, "I spent $7,500 today, Dad." I said, "Do you feel guilty about that?" She said, "Nope." And I said, "Never feel guilty for anything you do, good or bad." And so I said, "Look, I gotta go. I'm gonna call you on my way back to the airport on Sunday. You know, congratulations." Now, she's the type of kid that bought stuff for her brothers and, you know, everything else. But so when I'm driving back on the cab, I call her up. "How you doing? How's it going?" Now, here's the beauty behind the whole thing. She was 15 years old. And she said, "Dad, you know what? The experience is way greater than I ever imagined." And then she said, "But you know the part that I can't stop thinking about? It was my mind that created this." Now, my daughter, since then, has created so many amazing things in her life. And it was Christmas time, and I sat down with her, and I said to her, "Okay, how do you do it? What's the secret?" And she said, "I'm going to tell you what I do. I move into a state of being where I convince my brain and body it's already done. And then I get up and live as if my prayers are already answered." She said, "The moment I start to analyze and try to figure out where it's going to come from, I just return back to the old self. The new self would never think that way." So my children begin to understand that they are empowered by their mind and their interaction with the field of intelligence that everybody has access to.